Kalispera, Seolus. Hey. All right. Should I go? Okay, hello, hi. I'm very grateful to be here at Voxxed Days in Athens. I'm Alex Qin. I'm a programmer and a teacher, and I'm going to tell you the story of how shaving my head made me a better programmer, sort of. Spoiler alert, not really. And what I learned along the way. So I'm originally from Paris. Bonjour. I moved to the US to go to college, and that's where I learned to code. I wanted to be an astronaut, so I joined the engineering program at my school, and one of the requirements was an introduction to programming class in Python. Should I pause? No, we're good? Okay. An intro to programming class in Python, so I took it, and I fell in love with code immediately. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I felt like I could be creative and analytical all at once. I felt like I'd finally found an art form with which I could express myself. So I started programming, and I decided to major in computer science, and that was a very easy decision, but staying in computer science wasn't so easy. And it wasn't because learning to code is hard, which it is. It's frustrating. It's a lot of dealing with your computer telling you you failed over and over again. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was overcoming other people's perceptions and my own perceptions about my abilities as a programmer. At the time, I was one of maybe 5 women in my computer science classes. There were some classes where I was the only woman. And there were very few people in my classes who hadn't been programming since they were 10 years old. So even though I did really well in all of those classes, no one really wanted to work with me or talk to me. It was very lonely. I felt like I was hyper-visible and invisible at the same time. And this was before all of the scandals came out, before people started talking about tech's lack of diversity, before there was really a shared language about it. So it was my first year in college, and computer science really didn't seem like the place for me. People didn't believe I was a programmer. They would say to me, "Prove it. Do you even know what the command line is?" Which is a ridiculous question. But it wasn't just students. One of my male friends told me that our professor asked him, "When are you going to fuck Alex?" So my peers didn't see me as a programmer, and my professors didn't either. But it wasn't just them. I didn't believe it myself. Until my last year of college, when people would ask me if I was a programmer, I would say, "Not really, I'm trying to become one." Which is silly because the act of programming is what makes you a programmer. But I'm really stubborn, so I decided I was going to become a good programmer in a way that would be unquestionable to the world. So I joined my school's competitive programming team and became a leader for our computer club and took all of the hardest computer science classes and won a bunch of hackathons, and I finally became accepted by my peers. And it's ridiculous that for other people, all they had to do was show up and look nerdy, and I had to do all of this work, but I made it, so it didn't seem to matter. Then I graduated from college with a computer science degree in 2013 and started my career as a software engineer in New York. And this was taken in front of Yankee Stadium. And though I had experienced some discrimination in school for being a woman in the computer science department, I was not prepared for what was about to happen in the professional world. And some of it was, small things like microaggressions, people asking me over and over if I was a programmer, and also some bigger, scarier, more serious incidents, like what we've seen has happened at Uber and Google. So I'm going to tell you about some of those incidents. And I didn't used to share these stories when talking about my story because I didn't want to, dissuade young women from entering the field, but I think it's important for me to share these. And I found a draft of a blog post that I wrote after these things happened when I was 22, and I never published it, so I'm going to read the first few sentences of that blog post now. I didn't want to have to write this. I didn't want my first blog post to be about this. I wanted it to be about something technical, like browser compatibility or accessibility or anything else. But I can no longer keep silent. And it's not because I can't bear to hold this in, but rather because you all need to hear this. I used to be one of those women who believed that all that mattered was my code. I didn't want to identify as female developer. I just wanted to be a developer. And it goes on. So I never published this blog post because I was too afraid at the time. But I'll share these stories today, 5 stories that made me want to quit programming. At my first software engineering internship, I was the only woman on the engineering team. And a few weeks into the job, the QA lead asked me to get coffee. I was new, and he was nice, so I said yes. And as we were getting coffee, he started asking me very personal questions like, where do you live? What trains do you take to work? Do you have a boyfriend? Does he get jealous? Do you like to dress sexy for him? Do you wear lingerie for him? And so forth. And it made me really uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. So I just finished my coffee as quickly as possible, and we headed back to the office. After that, I locked myself in the women's bathroom and cried. After that day, he kept trying to spend time with me, and I was really nervous around him, and I hated having to work close to him every day. I was too scared to tell anyone because he was the lead of the QA team and I was just an intern. But on my last day, I got the courage to tell my boss what had happened, and he was very surprised, and he said, "But he's such a nice guy." And he told me he would make sure this didn't happen again. I later found out that he continued to harass women at the company and even got promoted. But you know, he was a really nice guy. After that experience, I mostly wore jeans and t-shirts to work, and I stopped wearing makeup or perfume because I was afraid of getting that kind of attention again. After that, I got another job as a front-end engineer. That team was really great, and even though I was the only woman on the team, I felt safe and supported, and I was doing a good job. We were part of a portfolio of companies, so I got to attend a lot of tech events like this one. And the job was awesome, but what happened at the events and conferences was not awesome. Soon after I joined, our team was invited to a networking event organized by our venture capital firm. It was a very nice evening with an open bar, and after a few drinks, I started talking to another software engineer, and at one point during the conversation, he tried to kiss me, and I had to physically push him away. After that happened, I was upset, but I tried to make the most out of the event, so I started talking to someone else. And after a while, he also tried to kiss me. So I had to push someone away physically for a second time, and at this point I was furious. I yelled at him, I said this wasn't okay. He told me I shouldn't be so stuck up. I took it as my cue to leave the event. After that, I really avoided tech events with alcohol and was very nervous at events where alcohol was being served. A couple months later, our engineering team went to San Francisco for a programming conference. One of our investors was based in San Francisco, and he invited me to meet with him to talk about my work and my career, and he said I had a lot of promise, and I thought this was a really good opportunity. So we met for dinner, but I quickly realized that this was not about work. This was a date. I tried to steer the conversation towards work, asking him questions about the company, investing, even taking notes on my phone, like trying to send every possible signal that this was not romantic without offending him. But he wasn't getting the hint. After dinner, he asked me to come home with him for champagne, and he really insisted. I think he told me it was his birthday. It was hard for me to say no because he was an investor of the company I worked for, but I successfully got out of there. After that, I tried to avoid him as much as possible, and I was a lot less friendly with the men that I met through work. A couple months after that, I went to a programming conference in Mexico. It was a really fun conference where everyone lived in little cabins by the beach, and you shared a cabin with a few other people. There was a lot of drinking at this conference, and one night, one of the conference speakers who was staying in my cabin let himself into my room in the middle of the night, really drunk, while I was asleep. He woke me up, and he tried to convince me to let him sleep in my bed with me, saying he didn't want to sleep alone. I was really scared, but I got him out of my room. The next day, I told the conference organizers what happened, and so they sent out a reminder about the code of conduct. I spent the rest of the conference locked in my room, angry, crying, and not wanting to run into him. After that, my engineering team always sent a male chaperone with me to tech conferences. A few months after that, our company was growing, so we hired a new VP of engineering. He had never worked with a woman on his team before, and he was my new boss. He would say things that I didn't think anyone would say to me. Like, he would make jokes about how women existed only to serve men. He would make comments about my appearance, telling me he didn't like the way I dressed or how I did my hair. One time I was wearing all black, and he told me I looked like a mustard sandwich, which is maybe because I'm Asian and my skin is yellow. I'm not sure. When he was disciplined by our CEO for his behavior, he apologized to me and explained that women in tech like the attention, which is something that I knew wasn't true. And he also said he wished we had more women on the team, but that would mean we'd have to lower the hiring bar, which felt like a big insult and is also very untrue. And although I was one of the first engineers to join the team and my code was really all over the code base, he started pushing me onto smaller and smaller projects and giving me grunt work. At one point, I was asked to stop talking during product meetings because I intimidated the product lead, who was also a man. It became impossible for me to work there, and I ended up having to quit because it was just too hostile a work environment for me. But it really didn't feel like quitting. It felt like I was pushed out. And so after all of these incidents of harassment, nowhere felt safe. Not my job, not the tech world, not even code. People were even leaving sexist comments on my pull requests on open source projects. And all this happened when I was 22, so I was 1 year into my career, and it was not fine. I became very depressed. I even tried to write a blog post about it and never published it. It felt like, why do I love programming if programming doesn't love me back? And I was just trying to do my job, do what I loved, just trying to write code, and it was becoming impossible for me to do so. It was actually making me very depressed, and I felt like maybe I should quit. It should be the end of my career. And I seriously considered leaving the tech industry, but as I said before, I'm really stubborn, so I decided again I'm going to try to find a solution. So I asked my friends for advice, and I only had male programmer friends at the time, so I decided I'm going to meet as many female programmers as possible. I got friends to introduce me to female engineers at their companies and went on blind coffee dates with a bunch of ladies. I was looking for advice and looking to create a support network, and I asked them, what do I do? How do I survive in this field? I got a lot of different advice. This one woman who'd been a professional programmer for over 10 years told me that when she cut her hair short, she stopped getting harassed at tech events. So I kind of tossed that to the side. And another friend told me, why don't you become a badass programmer? Like, become known for your expertise and people will have to take you seriously. Basically telling me to lean in. And I figured, okay, I can try that. So I started giving talks at meetups about things I was very passionate about, like the JavaScript programming language and web accessibility. And it went really well, and after a while I was even invited to speak at a big programming conference, kind of like this one, where people were flying from around the country to attend, and they paid hundreds of dollars a ticket, and I shared this stage with people I really respected, people who built the tools I used every day. And I was certainly the youngest person on stage. I was 23, and I was talking about something important, web accessibility. So I was really excited. I felt accomplished. I was badass. So I gave my talk, and it went really well. But the first thing that I was asked after my talk was a man asked me, how do I talk to women at bars? And that didn't have anything to do with accessibility. And I couldn't believe it. After all the work I'd done to get there, even in the moment when my expertise was undeniable, like I was literally on stage at a conference that he paid money to attend, teaching him things, even then I wasn't seen as a programmer. So I learned that being a badass doesn't help. After all of this work, after leaning all the way in, I wasn't seen as a developer, not even a female developer, just female. And at this point, I was really angry. I was so sick of being treated this way because of my gender and my appearance, but I'm a hacker. So I decided I'm going to hack my appearance, and I shaved my head. Just kidding, that's Natalie Portman. I shaved my head, and the weirdest thing happened. Suddenly, overnight, I was a good programmer. For real. I stopped getting sexually harassed at tech conferences, people listened to me and respected me. I stopped being this mix of hypersexualized and underskilled programmer. And I tried to think about it scientifically, like, is there something in hair that makes you worse at being a programmer? Like maybe my hair was weighing me down, it was like an aerodynamic problem, you know? But that can't be right because this guy's a really good programmer. And so are these guys. And this guy's a really good programmer too. Just kidding, that's Serial from the movie Hackers, which is an amazing movie. So it had nothing to do with my hair, obviously, but now all of a sudden I was seen as a good programmer. Like literally my relations with other programmers changed, and it was quite marvelous. So what had changed then, if not my actual skills, which really hadn't leveled up overnight? It was the way I was being perceived by my peers. I was no longer this hyper-feminine lady who didn't belong, and people even mistook me and my boyfriend for a gay couple once. And so I didn't present as feminine anymore, and so it was acceptable for me to be a programmer, and even a good one. And this was a mind-blowing discovery for me because even though I knew I was a good programmer in my heart, and I knew about sexism, now I really understood it and had proof of it on a personal level. So I realized the tech industry is not a meritocracy, unlike I initially thought, unlike many people had told me. This industry doesn't allow capable, passionate people like me to succeed regardless of their skills. It systematically pushes out women and gender nonconforming people, people of color, people with disabilities, etc. And I advice that people had given me, which was all about changing myself. They said, cut your hair, become a badass, be more of a bitch, learn to ignore it. And I thought, no, it's not me who has to change, it's the tech industry that has to change. Technology is a part of everything we do. It shapes how we interact with the world and with each other. It controls money, how we learn, how we date, even who becomes president. And humans build technology, so the people who are building the technology we use every day have a huge influence on how we live our lives and our future. So who these humans are and how we write code really matters. Right now, for the most part, the gatekeepers of technology are a small and homogeneous group that is not representative of all the people who use technology. And this is a problem because a homogeneous tech workforce leads to big blind spots, like when the iPhone X couldn't tell Chinese women apart, or when Google Photos launched with image recognition that labeled pictures of black people as gorillas. And this is even more scary now in the age of mass surveillance and predictive policing. This problem has real life or death implications for a lot of people. If we want to solve the world's problems responsibly, we need people from all backgrounds building technology because we need diverse perspectives to solve complex issues, and because those who experience problems are the best equipped to solve them. Right now, the tech industry is broken because it's homogeneous and because it's run by people who are hungry for power, who have lost sight of what matters. So I was 23 and I realized that the tech industry is broken, and I decided as long as I'm in this field, I'll work to fix it, to make it more diverse, more inclusive, and better for all humans. So I started my quest to teach people from underrepresented backgrounds to code so that we can change the face of technology, create pathways for economic mobility for people, for communities that have been left out of technology, and to empower more of us to build solutions to the problems that affect us instead of our fate being in the hands of others. I started teaching on the side as a volunteer at a high school for recent immigrants in the Bronx and Harlem in New York. Some of my students built an app that teaches young adults about affordable makeup and makeup styles for all skin tones, with the goal of challenging white supremacist beauty standards. And they went on to win multiple hackathons and even presented at the EmojiCon conference. And one of the students, Candy, is studying computer science at Stanford now, which is amazing. After that, I started working at Coalition for Queens, a free programming school for adults from low-income and underrepresented backgrounds, as their curriculum director. I helped launch the program. 50% of our class were women, 50% were immigrants, 50% had no college degree, 50% were Black and Latinx, and the average income of the class when we started was about $20,000 a year. Graduates of the program went on to work at the New York Times, Spotify, Vice as professional programmers, and some make above $120,000 a year now. One of the projects that came from this class was an Android app called Blazon, which is an online community of women, children, and people of color and LGBTQ folks that aims to combat street harassment. Madeline, one of the students who built this, joined Pinterest and started Tecnolochicas, a group for Latinas in tech, and has become an icon and advocate for diversity in tech in San Francisco. After that, I started mentoring young girls in the Worldwide Technovation competition. For that competition, 2 of my high school students built an app that aims to reduce produce waste by connecting farms to restaurants so that farms can sell their ugly produce, which would otherwise go to waste, at a discounted rate, which is like a huge problem in the US, the amount of food that's wasted. It's an iOS app called Grow Green, and Rachel on the left is studying computer science at Yale now, and Priya on the right graduated high school and is continuing to build the app, and she was named one of Crane's 20 Under 20 last year, and recently spoke at the Global Food Innovation Summit in Milan. And I teach people to code as an ethical practice. This is a photo of some of my students, and we're all wearing t-shirts that have the binary representation of the words, "With great power comes great responsibility." And after all this teaching, I've learned 3 very important lessons about code, which is that you shouldn't have to compromise on any aspect of your identity to do what you love. Some people have taken the wrong message from my talk, which is that you should shave your head to be a programmer. That's not it. Since shaving my head, I've had a lot of different hairstyles. I wear it short because I feel like it. You should be able to just be you, whoever that is, and write code safely. 2, excellence in code can come from anyone. Anyone can achieve excellence if they're given support, a safe space to learn, and if you believe that they can succeed. I've taught people from age 12 to 63 from all socioeconomic backgrounds, races, countries, immigration status, and gender, and this is the truth. And these projects that my students have built, they're important, they're game changers, so we need technologists from diverse backgrounds if we have any hope for a brighter future. And it's because of these beliefs that I started my latest project. In 2016, I read the book The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, in which I learned about how Black and brown populations are disproportionately and unfairly criminalized and murdered in the United States, and how the system of mass incarceration is truly the latest iteration of slavery. I wanted to learn from people who had experience with the criminal justice system, so I started teaching people who had been to prison how to code with the Fortune Society in October 2016. They had a computer lab, and that's where we held class. And it was a small class with just 6 students who were all really passionate about learning to code, but it was really hard for my students to make progress because they didn't have a computer at home. It turns out you need a computer and the internet to learn how to code. And I realized that tech companies have tons of unused laptops just sitting in their IT closets, and I could probably get them to donate some laptops to my class. And that's how the Code Cooperative was born. I needed a brand and a website so that tech companies would donate laptops to us, and it worked. I got laptops for all of my students and 20 extra laptops that I donated to the Fortune Society's computer lab. And once this website and story was out there, people really resonated with the mission. There were more people who wanted to be able to learn these skills. Other organizations working with formerly incarcerated people wanted to send us students. And there was an overwhelming cry of support from the tech community. So many people wanted to get involved and help out. And that's why today, over 2 years later, because enough people believed in this mission, we've grown to become a collective. We're the Code Cooperative, an entirely volunteer-led community that runs completely on donations. And we see a problem that we want to address, which is that the tech industry is a closed and homogenous group that is building things that serve some people and not others, and that even harm a lot of people. We want to democratize access to tech education and teach our most vulnerable populations highly valuable skills that will allow us to have access to more opportunities, to create opportunities for ourselves, and to build technology that solves real problems that we have identified and experienced. We're a community of people who learn, use, and build technology to create life-changing possibilities for individuals and communities impacted by incarceration. And we work for the liberation of all beings. We imagine and commit to building a world where our collective humanity is reflected in technology, society, and policy. And we use the word liberation because we believe in the transformative power of tech education. People who've been in prison for over 15 years don't know how to use the internet or a computer and have a really hard time re-entering society and getting work. Being able to successfully navigate the digital world and create technology can be a life-changing opportunity that can really make the difference between returning to prison and staying out. And we do this not just for the liberation of people who have been to prison, who deserve a fair second chance, but for our own liberation and sense of justice. And these 2 quotes really encapsulate why I do this work. No one is free until we are all free, and I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own. So I want to share with you some words from our community about what they see as the power of technology. Okay, cool. That was a glimpse of our community's dreams on the first day of our 2018 class, and our students learned how to use a computer, how to use the internet, how to write code, and they actually built the projects that they dreamt of. But what's most important is that we truly became a community. On the last day of class, I watched people who were strangers to each other 12 weeks earlier cheer for each other, hold each other, cry with each other, and call each other family. And we're continuing to grow the impact of our work by offering free technology education, donating resources, and developing liberatory technology projects with the goal of building collective power for communities that have been impacted by incarceration. And more than ever, I know that this is important work. I've seen it change people's lives, and I'm committed to continuing this work for the liberation of all people, including myself. So hopefully I've made a convincing case for why diversity in tech is important and even crucial to building better technology. And for the last part of this talk, I'll share with you some thoughts about how you can help make a change in this industry and in your own community. Because this is one of the questions I get asked the most. How do I make my organization more diverse? People ask me this all the time. But I've been thinking about a new question recently, which is how do we heal? How do we heal our communities and our industry? How do we heal our internalized racism, sexism, transphobia, and all our other harmful beliefs, thoughts, and behaviors? How do we heal the harms that were done to us and the harms that we have done to others? And really, how do we heal our deepest fears? Fear of not belonging, not having enough, and fear of being hurt. I gave this talk almost exactly a year ago at DockerCon in San Francisco, but I didn't blur the personal information of the men in these stories. I shared their full names, photo, and where they worked. After years of staying silent, I spoke up. I was really scared to call these men out, but the response was really, really positive. Within 3 hours, 2 women messaged me to tell me some of these men had harassed them too. So I really felt that I'd done the right thing. I felt like I was a warrior, fighting for equality, giving a voice to the voiceless, telling others who had been victims of discrimination and harassment, I can speak up and you can also speak up. Or at the very least, this is fucked up and you're not alone. And hopefully inspiring people to make change in their communities so that others don't have to go through this. And I know that some positive change has come from this, but I also see now how some harm has come from this. When these incidents happened, I was really scared, I was really angry, and I felt completely powerless. And the only way I knew how to regain my power was to take power away from those who had taken mine. And that's why I resorted to public shaming them. I did it in the name of truth and justice. I also did it out of revenge. But public shaming is not the way that we heal as a community, and that's not the way that I heal. Because when I harm others, I harm myself, and hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. When these incidents of harassment happened early on in my career, it created a deep wound in me. I began to fear men in tech. A story was written in my mind that I will continue to be hurt by people who look like this. But this doesn't have to be the truth. There are many stories and beliefs I have learned throughout my life that have come from various places. When I was little, I learned that I'm not worthy of love unless I'm perfect, unless I'm the best at everything, which is why I never gave up in my pursuit for success as a software engineer. I couldn't give up, even if it was harming me. I just had to keep going. When I started coding, I learned the story that tech is a meritocracy, and if I'm good at code, then I will succeed. And if I don't succeed, it must be that I'm not a good coder. From the media and my teachers, I learned that women and minorities are just less interested in coding, and men are just better at coding. But something happened that made me unlearn that story, and I learned a new story. I learned that tech is not a meritocracy, that excellence in code can come from anyone, and that we all deserve an opportunity to be a part of this community, this industry, and to co-create the future. We all deserve to be here, to be safe, and to thrive, no matter what body we were born in. We've all learned stories. We've learned stories about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, who is a criminal, and who is not deserving of being treated like a human. And we didn't choose these stories. We learned them from our parents, from our teachers, from our friends, from the media, from society, but we can unlearn them, and we can choose to learn new stories. The story of who is a programmer was created in the 1980s to sell computers. Women actually invented computer science and were the first programmers. But in the 80s, there was a big drop in women programming, because that's when personal computers started showing up. Early personal computers were toys, basically, and so companies decided to market them entirely to men and boys. And so the idea that computers are for boys became the prevailing story, the story that we told ourselves about computers. It defined who geeks were. The image of the boy genius programmer emerged, and this led to where we are now, a place where this story is so old and so strong that we can't tell that it's not the truth, and we can't even tell where it came from. And so we treat each other like this, we harm each other, but this is just a story. And when we're aware of it, we can unlearn it. But being aware isn't enough. Changing our behaviors, thoughts, and beliefs takes work. And because this story has been there for a long time, it will take a long time to rewrite it. And these are the most traveled neural paths in our brains, but we can travel new ones. Changing these stories requires open-mindedness, really learning about how our patriarchal and white supremacist cultures impacts people, learning from those who are harmed by it, following people on Twitter with different opinions. I would follow all of these people. Amélie Lamont, Amy Nguyen, Ash Dryden, Omayeli Aranyeka, Candace Williams, Caroline Sinders, Kat Small, Erica Joy, Tasha Green, Marco Rogers, Terry Burns, and Tiffany Ashley Bell, and there's many, many more. Being open to learning from others and being okay with being wrong. And changing our behaviors relies on commitment and daily practice. Changing the way we do things one day at a time, how we talk to each other, how we talk about technology, how we hire, the culture in our community. Lack of diversity and inclusion in a lot of cases happens not on purpose, but on accident. Diverse and inclusive environments that are supportive to all happen on purpose, intentionally. So we need to be intentional about our culture. And if you want practical strategies for making your work environment more diverse and inclusive, you can just read all of this, projectinclude.org, amazing resource. And once we've committed to doing better, we need to be accountable for our actions. Righting wrongs whenever we can, asking myself, have I harmed anyone today? How can I make it up to them? How can I live my life differently? And yes, this is all really hard work, and it won't happen overnight. The stories we've learned about who belongs in our industry and who gets to succeed are like air that we've been breathing in for a very long time. And Beverly Daniel Tatum explains this beautifully. I sometimes visualize the ongoing cycle of racism as a moving walkway at the airport. Active racist behavior is equivalent to walking fast on the conveyor belt. Passive racist behavior is equivalent to standing still on the walkway. No overt effort is being made, but the conveyor belt moves the bystanders along to the same destination as those who are actively walking. But unless they are walking actively in the opposite direction at a speed faster than the conveyor belt, unless they are actively anti-racist, they will find themselves carried along with the others. Our job now is to walk actively in the opposite direction at a high speed every day. And if I fuck up today, that's okay, just try again tomorrow. And lastly, we must practice self-compassion. Being compassionate to myself when I fuck up, when I hurt someone. I can't make any lasting change when there is shame, when there is fear. So learning to forgive myself and others. I imagine a world where we are no longer harming each other, where we all have access to food, shelter, education, and love, where the body we were born in doesn't determine what opportunities we have access to, where we aren't destroying our planet. And I truly believe that we all want this. And this world is within reach. We have everything we need to get there, and we have to start right now because we've spent too long going in the other direction. And all we have to do is start with ourselves. I truly believe that you transform yourself to transform the world. Recently, I've been learning a new story, that I'm worthy no matter what I do, no matter what other people say, that you are not separate from me, and that when I hurt others, I hurt myself, and that my own liberation cannot come at the cost of harming others. So to the men that I called out in my talk, I want to say this: I'm sorry I hurt you. Just because I was hurt doesn't mean that I get to hurt you. And if you want to join me in co-creating the world that we yearn for, please do. And if you don't want to, that's also okay. Because this isn't about those men, and this isn't about me. This is about our collective future, the future of humanity, for real. And this world that we imagine is within reach, and we can get there, but we can only make it happen together. Now it's the time to be brave and to wage love. Thank you.
You are badass.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any thoughts or questions or for Alex?
I know that you asked us to not focus on saving your head. I understand the message, but I really want to ask you something. I think that at least here in Greece, people are very conservative, and I feel like if a woman shaved her head, it would look very unprofessional. What do you believe in this? Is it only a fear, or is it reality around the world?
I mean, thank you for your question. I think, we don't live in there's societal norms wherever we operate that are rooted in history and cultural context. And for example, in the United States, in some places, it's considered unprofessional to have tattoos or to, wear dreadlocks. So if someone can't go to work with a shaved head in Greece, that's unfortunate. At the end of the day, we have to do what we need to do to feed ourselves and our families. And I'm committed to trying to change my environment for the better wherever I go, like little by little. So that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I hope that Greece is headed in a direction where you can have whatever hairstyle you like in the workplace.
In your experience, when you shaved your head, did you feel like people criticized you for it?
I mean, my students were like, "Oh, why did you do that? It's ugly." But not my employers. No. I got much more criticism when I had long hair because of the stories people had learned about who is deserving of being in the tech space and who isn't. And so when I had a shaved head, I didn't seem like I didn't fit in, I was like a weird, cool hacker. I mean, I'm still those things.
So I had the opportunity to turn around and look at some of your faces while you were listening to that talk. And the expressions you guys were giving the talk told me a lot about what you were feeling while you were listening to this. So I'm happy to take a few more because this is a unique opportunity to have someone who is helping us evolve in a positive way, at least in these last 50 minutes or so. So please, yeah.
Hello. First, I am Mohammed. I'm from Iraq. I came to Greece as a refugee for 1 year ago. I have a simple background as a software engineering. I studied in the university. When I arrived to Greece, I found place. Actually, it's NGO that's provide a free coursing as a full stack web developer. I joined that course for 7 months. After that, I graduated from 2 months ago, and I find my career. I share that with you because that place actually now they need support as mentors, and I know there is a lot of developers here. They can offer a good teaching for the students. That's all. If you can provide any help for this, actually, because I like that place, I want to support that place. Thank you all.
That's awesome. Thank you. What's the name?
So,
the name of the organization is Social Hacker Academy, and here we have the head of the education. He can provide you the resource if you want any information about that.
Cool. Thank you.
So, have you guys ever heard of Social Hackers Academy here in Athens? All right, it's a awesome initiative, kind of similar to the code cooperative that Alex is running, and that's fantastic. So, any more? Because this is I had some other hands. I think I saw 1 or 2 hands. Yes, there we are.
This is really inspiring, honestly. Like thumbs up, honestly. I just would like to have a clarification from you. You made a very bold statement saying the tech industry is broken. I would like to ask you to clarify, is it the tech industry in the United States is broken? Do you see the same thing in Canada, in Sweden, in Denmark? Just thinking out loud, what do you think?
Thank you for asking. I can only speak to my experience working in the United States. So yeah, this is very much US-centric. However, at the same time, you know, our code lives on the internet and we collaborate across the world. And from speaking to people from many different countries, I've heard very similar types of issues, but it just depends who's the dominant group, right? Like in the US, the dominant group is like white men, for example. In India, that would not be the case, right? And then there are some countries where there's like no gender disparity within software. And I don't think this is a technology industry problem. This is like a world, everywhere we go problem. And I think I have to rephrase that. I think the tech industry is broken aren't really the words that best describe what I think it is. I think we need to, as communities of this planet, heal together, because right now we're harming each other.
There's a hand up there right in the back. I'm wondering whether they're just pointing up to the roof because they saw something interesting, or they want me to run all the way to the back over here and give the microphone. Am I right? Got a question, anybody? No, I think he's just pointing to the roof. He's just pointing to the roof. He's like, look at that light. Alrighty. Any more questions or comments, or before we let Alex enjoy Athens for the next couple of days? Good. Well, Alex, again, thank you. That was a fantastic talk. And you really made us think, and I think you helped us evolve a little more. Thank you very, very much, and good luck, and enjoy Athens.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ευχαριστώ.